I suppose for me, meeting last year when the 25-year anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, to meet President Bill Clinton and tell him my story, to meet Senator George Mitchell and tell him the story. And I wrote them a letter, each handed it to them, and they replied with a letter, each of them individually to me. It was amazing because it was almost like the closing of the circle for me, because here, these two men that had been so instrumental in negotiating that peace deal that allowed me to come back home, and here they were in a building that I owned.
We're trying to focus on is to get the Americans north. Most of the travel industry recognizes that there's that sort of southern triangle that everyone does when they come from the States, and most people don't venture north, and we're really trying to get more people up and to change that mentality.
Those were the voices of Anthony and Andrea Kieran, proprietors of Belfast's new 5-star boutique hospitality destination, Regency House. And I'm John Lee.
And I'm Martin Nutty. So after we left our chat with Lord Mayor Mickey Murray, we had to hot-foot it across the city. But one of the interesting things about Belfast is just how accessible everything is on foot. And so a 15-minute walk from Belfast City Hall can lead you to an area of the city, a beautiful Regency-style square called Crescent Gardens. And it is at Crescent Gardens that you will find Regency House. It's a historic building. It's built in the 1840s, apparently with money from one of Northern Ireland's timber barons. And what's wonderful about this particular location is the quietness away from the hurly-burly of the city centre. This is a beautiful location overlooking a square where you can relax and have that nice private time while at the same time maintaining access to all of the amazing venues that you can visit in Belfast. So, with all that, we will now talk to Anthony Kieran and Andrea Kieran about the story behind Regency House.
Well, here we are in the Queen's Quarter, Upper Crescent, Regency House, and sitting in the presidential suite. Anthony and Andrea, thanks for welcoming us to your place.
You're
Very welcome.
Great to be here. You told us recently you had a very important guest, and there's no guest I'd rather hear about than the one you'll mention to us now, because his name comes up frequently as we are here in Belfast, such a pivotal character in the new Belfast.
I mean, he needs no introduction to this part of the world. Senator George Mitchell. We were fortunate enough to have him twice in Regency House, and the last time was, Andrea, a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah.
So during that time, I mean, it was, he was over, there was a celebration of an unveiling of a plaque in his honour, and he stayed with us for the week, and we were fortunate to have a private dining experience with him, so 2 hours in his company with his daughter and his daughter's best friend. So it was a very special night for us.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, and the effect that man has had on this city is just really incredible. And it's the second time that he's stayed with us, and so we had the opportunity to really express to him the gratitude that we have for all the work that he's done and the impact that he's had on so many people's lives.
What kind of guy is he to talk to as somebody across the table?
Yeah.
When he's not being Senator Mitchell?
Oh, he is so funny, number one, but the stories that he has is incredible, and he is quite the storyteller. I mean, he just 2 hours goes by in a flash when you have an opportunity like that with a guy like him. So it was one of those moments that you maybe experience once in a lifetime, but we were just delighted to be able to spend some good time with him.
Maybe the storytelling is why you hit it off so well with the Irish here in Belfast.
I think so. I do. I definitely think that there is something to that. Andrea, you would agree, probably.
I totally agree. And I think one of the things that was amazing is to hear some of the behind the scenes things that were going on in his personal life and the amount of time that he dedicated to his work here and how it nearly came to an end. He, I think, was about to sort of call it quits, didn't think that he was going to be able to get where he wanted us to all go. And he gave it that one last try. And that's what made all the difference. And the number of lives that it's impacted since, it's just incredible.
And how much the city has revived. But why don't we find out a little bit more about you both?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested. I hear a odd combination of accents in the room right now between my North County Dublin / New York accent,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm hearing with Andrea a Virginia Belfast combo, which is truly unique to me. And from Anthony, I'm hearing just Belfast mostly, I would say.
Well,
but there's probably an odd twinge of American still working
there's
there.
a twinge and a bit of South Armagh in there as well.
Yeah, okay.
No doubt. So, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the backstory. I'll start with you, Andrea. So
Okay.
you're a rare bird with the Virginia Belfast combo.
Yeah.
So tell me about the journey to Belfast and your origin story, so to speak.
Well, the journey to Belfast is really via Anthony. I really would not be here if I hadn't met Anthony, and that's a whole other story. But it's strange how a small thing like going out on a Friday night changes the entire course of your life. And that's exactly what happened. So when I met Anthony, it sort of set off a chain reaction of things. I probably always had an interest in living abroad. Didn't really know anyone from another country and hadn't traveled much myself. But when I met Anthony, I also met an entire group of Irish people because they tend to stick together quite a lot. And so it was a whole new world and one that I really was quite interested in. Anthony had plans to travel around the world, which he did for a couple of years. And in that time, I moved to London with the company that I worked for at the time. I worked for Accenture for about 19 years. And so I moved to London while Anthony was living it up and traveling around the world. And then he made his way back to London and then got a job in Belfast. And that was it.
It's a good story though, because we were living in DC at the time, and I was in a house with a crowd of Irish guys and Irish Americans, and it's a good story. It was a Friday night, and this guy from Kerry, Kieran O'Donoghue, he said to me, "Look, you have to come out with me. I'm on a blind date tonight. And I don't want to land up to the bar in case she doesn't turn up and all that, those sorts of things." So eventually he persuaded me, because I'd been out the night before, I was going to take it easy that night. And he persuaded me to go to the bar that night. And of course, we get to the very front of the bar, this girl waiting for him. So I get the heave-ho immediately at the bar. So I'm sitting there, Norman no mates, in this bar on the other side of DC. He's off on his date with the girl, and eventually I think I was at the bar and there was a song was being sung. "I Wish I Was Back Home in Derry," and I was singing the words to it. Of course, it was written by Bobby Sands, that particular tune. But Andrea walked up. It was her birthday, and she walked up and she says, "How do you know that song?" And I think I said, "Andrea, it reminds me of home."
Yes.
So, but it turned out anyway. So we met that night, and it turned out the guy, Kieran, ended up marrying the girl that he met on the blind date, and I ended up marrying Andrea. And the two of us, he's got 2 sons, I've got 2 sons. So it shows you that these kind of random moments in life can be life-changing, really.
Well, you mentioned South Armagh, you mentioned Bobby Sands, and you mentioned what can turn your life around in a single day. Tell us tell us about your life in South Armagh, what it was like living there and growing up there, and what got you the heck out of there.
I mean, this is a story I don't tell too many times, but it's effectively, I grew up, I was born in 1970, and I grew up just knowing nothing but the troubles, really. I had a very happy childhood, believe it or believe it not. It was mother and father, salt of the earth people. neighbourhood, Silver Ridge Football Club I played for. We lived on the outskirts of Crossmaglen. Amazing people, the people of South Armagh. But it just was one of those things. We were living in a kind of a time that basically there was conflict and it was ongoing all the time. So bombs were a constant probably, and shooting and that kind of stuff was a constant in my life growing up. It became almost normality, really, you know. Like I can remember times in school being, you know, told to go under the desk because there was IRA men out and they were having a gun battle with British soldiers in the next field. And, you know, they were kind of same thing coming down from Mass on a Sunday. You would have gun battles in your garden and you would just lay under the kitchen table until they went past, and invariably you would have a squad of British Army into your house later on, and kind of you'd be questioned about what you saw and all of that. But ultimately, you know, I think I left. I have the distinction of being blown up twice in a 14-hour period. You know, it just happened. I mean, it was 1989 May. The second bomb was on the 4th of May. It was driving past Silver Bridge, and unfortunately, there was a fatality. A British soldier was killed in that when the car I was driving with my mother and sister was blown up. We were very lucky to escape with our lives. But I guess that for me, I think, you know, that night I'm sitting at home and I'm, you know, trying to figure it all out. And I had been accepted to Queen's and Jordanstown the following year. And I just, in that moment, I decided I was quitting Ireland. So I left Ireland. I decided to go to Liverpool. That happened in May. So the following August, I moved to Liverpool and I ended up doing a degree in Liverpool. And I moved on immediately. I moved out to the States. So I guess, you know, for me, I was living quite happily in the States. I mean, never, ever. I'd met Andrea at the time. And in 1998, we were sitting in a bar, actually. And it was when the peace deal was announced. And I remember looking at the TV and we were in an Irish bar. I think it was Nanny O'Brien's. And I remember looking at the TV, the whole bar remained quiet, just stopped. And you could see what was happening back home. You could see the cars out and the people were celebrating from both sides of the community were celebrating that there was peace. And I remember turning to Andrea and saying, this changes everything. Because effectively I always felt, and I've said this, that I never left Ireland on my terms. I felt as if I had kind of been forced out. That it wasn't my choice. I felt I had something to give to Ireland, to bring back to Ireland. And, you know, I think then we moved back a couple of years later. And I suppose for me, meeting last year when the 25-year anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, to meet President Bill Clinton and tell him my story, to meet Senator George Mitchell and tell him the story. And I wrote them a letter, each handed it to them. And they replied with a letter, each of them individually to me. It was amazing because it was almost like the closing of the circle for me, because here, these two men that had been so instrumental in negotiating that peace deal that allowed me to come back home. And here they were in a building that I owned, that they never would have been in, but for the fact that they negotiated that deal and allowed me to come back home and set up the various businesses that I've done. So that was a wonderful moment for me personally, and something that I never thought I would see. But, you know, sometimes, as they say, the weirdest things can happen, and the circle closed for me, which was amazing. And we got to talk with that a couple of weeks ago with Senator Mitchell. He asked me to tell the story again to his daughter. So it was just incredible to hear his take on it a second time, you know.
He must have been moved to hear your story because of his role in making it happen.
Oh, yeah.
You talk about going to Liverpool. Obviously, you got an education there.
Some people might argue strongly against that one.
Well, it does have a reputation as a bit of a party town.
You got a diploma.
Yeah.
Yes. But if I'm understanding your LinkedIn resume correctly, your background is in programming.
Yes.
And you fetched up at some point in NASA.
I did.
Your second NASA guest.
Yes. And I was just thinking, actually, when you were talking about your childhood in Armagh, we had another guest from Armagh, a lady called Jane Ferguson, who is a news reporter. And she talked also about the odd normalcy of a childhood in Armagh as a conflict played out around her. So that kind of really synchronizes up with other stories we've heard. But talk to me about the tech experience. Talk to me about, okay, I'm out in Northern Ireland, I go to Liverpool. Now I'm getting out of Liverpool and I'm going to the States. Tell me about that curve. Was it the tech that drove it? Was it a sense of adventure? Why moving on?
It for me, when I first went to the States, it was in my year out in Liverpool, and I went to Pittsburgh, and it was unbelievable opportunity there in the Institute of Pittsburgh. We're putting together one of these kind of programs that brought people from both sides of the community together. But when I landed in Pittsburgh, I could not believe it. It was like I had just landed in this unbelievable other world that I never knew existed. And I totally embraced being there. I got into work. I joined the Pittsburgh Celtics football team and got to know a lot of the people. The O'Donoghue family were quite instrumental in forming my thoughts, because their father, Tom Sr., had come with nothing. And there I was in his 10,000 square foot house back in 1992, 93. And he'd come from nothing really, but it showed me that it really it cemented in me. And again, after the bomb, I suppose, sometimes the worst things can lead to the best things, because when the bomb happened, I was kind of cruising through life. It's just an average student, no real ambitions. Probably wouldn't have left South Armagh, but it gave me a real drive to leave. But then when I got to Pittsburgh, it gave me a real drive to not only survive, but to thrive. And that was the catalyst for me to say, you know what, I want to do a little bit more than I've been doing. I want to push myself. So Pittsburgh was instrumental in that regard for me. I was very fortunate to work with some incredible people when I was there. Mike Broker is a man that I stay in touch with to this day. Would be a mentor figure for me. But when I moved on to NASA in Washington, D.C., funny, it was the O'Donoghue connection there. Tom is a good friend of mine. To this day, we still vacation together, as they say, out in the States. But, he was living in Washington, D.C., and he was basically trying to recruit for a position, but he was also trying to recruit for the DC Gaelic football team. So he says to me, listen, we've an opening for a corner forward, and we've an opening for a person in NASA. And so again, the Irish connection is huge out in America, and it was for me anyway. I sat down in my interview at NASA, and I'll not reveal the man's name. Amazing guy. I'll give you his initial ST. He'll know who it is. But he sat down with me, and he says, he put down like 10 pills on the table. And the pills were for various different things. This is in my interview. I'm sitting opposite the table, and he goes, oh yeah, this is for my stress, and this one's for my anxiety, and this is for my blood pressure. And so anyway, he says to me, he turns around to me, this is my interview, and he says, listen, I believe that my wife is cheating on me. Now, you're from South Armagh. What covert operations could I run to catch her in the act? And I said, and he says, by the way, you've got the job. So we discussed for the next half hour how I could help him catch his wife in the act. And at the end of it, he shook my hand, and I started the following Monday. And that was my introduction to NASA. And again, I ended up working my way up in NASA, worked with great people, Larry Helm, for example, Colin Enger, great people.
I should mention
Vince Hurley and Scott Peterson, great people that I'm still in touch with to this day. But they brought me on. I think they really I rode in their coattails. So, but again, it's a funny way how things happen, in life. So, and we did end up winning the championship. for Washington DC Gales, the North American Championship final, we won it, and that was actually another amazing moment in my life to win a championship like that out in the States. So
that's one of the best job interview stories I've heard. and I should just mention that the other NASA employee that we mentioned is Katie Coleman, who was an astronaut, spent about 130 days in space in her career. So we've had her twice. Irish American. Played flute and performed with the Chieftains.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Wow.
So, Andrea, let me ask you this. Did he play the NASA card with you, or did he play the Celtics? What were they called?
No, this is
the DC Gales.
The DC Gales, sorry.
He played neither. So when I met Anthony, as you do in the States, what do you do? Where do you work? And Anthony announced to me that he worked in a bar. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, there's this new Irish bar that's opened in town, and I'm working there. Fido's. And I said, oh, that's great. It's only after the first or second date when he just happened to mention NASA. And I said, what are you talking about, NASA? And he said, well, I work at NASA. And I said, you told me you worked at a bar. And then he said, oh, no, I help out a couple nights, a friend of mine. I said, you work at NASA, but you're telling everyone you work at a bar. So that's No, he just toned it down a bit. Yeah. It took a few times before I found that out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is when you met him, you obviously hear he's coming from Northern Ireland, right? Yeah. From Armagh. Yeah. And what was your knowledge at the time of Northern Ireland? If I said word association game way back in the 1990s, I said to you, Northern Ireland, your response would be?
Yeah, bombs and
violence
and awfulness. But I I have to say, I didn't really understand it all that well. Right. And it was only really through things that Anthony would say, and then maybe I would ask a few questions, that I started to learn more. And I think because we were in the States, we weren't in that environment. So it would only be the odd time, really, when things came up, that I would start to get an inkling as to what life was really like. But I will never forget the first time that we went to Anthony's parents' house. And while things were definitely better, I could then see the big watchtowers. There was one right behind Anthony's house. And in fact, when we decided to get married, we wanted to get married in the chapel right across the street from Anthony's parents. And I was looking at this watchtower and I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's really going to freak the Americans out completely. Yeah. And don't you know, that watchtower came down about 3 months before our wedding, which was incredible. But it was only when I went there that it really started to occur to me what it might have been like. And then the stories.
One of the first few times, remember we were driving through Fork Hill. Yeah. We were taking the little road that connects Newry to the town, and there was a 4-man foot patrol.
Yeah, that's right.
Of British soldiers, and Andrea nearly freaked out. But for me, it was kind of just normal. What's the matter, you know?
Yeah, it looked like a scene out of a movie. It didn't look real. But I was shaken like a leaf, and they couldn't understand why, because for them that it was totally normal to see that on the side of the road. So yeah, I really, and probably it's taken a long time, even living here, through the stories of other people, to really get a sense of what that was like. I was fortunate enough, I think, when I came here, that the worst of it was over, but you would still hear the odd, town has been evacuated because of suspicious, yeah. So there was a little bit of that.
So then peace comes knocking, and Anthony says, this changes everything. Yeah. You're living in America. Yeah. How comfortable were you with that move? He's familiar with this place. You have
got an impish grin right now.
Yeah.
Interesting to see.
I think Anthony has this great story about, is it the donkeys, Anthony, with the windy road?
Yeah.
That the roads in Ireland, none of them are long and straight. They're all windy because the donkeys won't go down a long straight road. They only go a little bit.
To where they see the end of it.
They
go to the end of the road
and then they turn and they see another little bit, so they go that little bit, and then they turn and they go another little bit. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit what happened with us, in that it wasn't a straight DC to Belfast at all. So it was DC for me to London, and then Anthony traveled around, and then Anthony came to London, and that was okay.
Right.
And then Anthony got a job in Belfast, and then it was, okay, I think we're going to Belfast.
Yeah.
So it's something that's sort of evolved over time. So I never really could have ever seen myself leaving the States before I met Anthony. And then it was a couple of these smaller moves on the way. And then we were here.
You know, we've talked to a lot of people who obviously have moved from Ireland to America, and we've talked to a lot of Americans who have rediscovered their Irish roots visiting Ireland. But I don't think we've had anybody an American who moved to Ireland.
Yeah.
We have now.
What's some of the cultural things you had to either, what the heck's going on here? I know my wife's from Italy, so when I go over there, there's parts of it I love, and there's parts of it I'm scratching my head over.
It still happens to this day. And I mean, we've been here since, what year was it, Anthony, that we came over? 2001?
2001, yeah.
So it's been a long time. I will still hear a word that I have no idea what it is. I will still hear people in Belfast talk, and I will not know what they're saying. So it still happens. And there are a few Americans, I think, sort of over time. I've met a few people in my situation, but there aren't very many. I think I've always really enjoyed the road less traveled, and I think Anthony is very much like that too. So I kind of enjoyed the fact that it was different, and I definitely stuck out like a sore thumb, and people would spot the American, especially in the early days when there weren't very many people traveling here. Right. And I honestly think it's something that we're trying to focus on, is to get the Americans north. You know, most of the travel industry recognizes that there's that sort of southern triangle that everyone does when they come from the States, and most people don't venture north. And we're really trying to get more people up and to change that mentality. So in the beginning, there were very few Americans, but we're getting more and more of them here, which is quite nice, and hopefully we'll see more of them here.
A couple staying with us tonight, in fact.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Your resume confuses me.
Oh, me too. Me too. That makes two of us.
That road less traveled, the donkey thing.
There's donkeys and all sorts of odd things on it, but there's obviously a strong tech thing going on here. Andrea referred to the fact that you're in London and moved back to Northern Ireland and you got a job here. But I assume at some point you branched out because you are the owner of a very successful, or I think maybe still the owner of a successful website for used cars in Northern Ireland.
That's right, yeah.
So talk to me about that leap from being an employee, whether it's with NASA or anybody else, and then branching out into business. How does your experience offshore change the desire, if you will, not just to be an employee, but to be an entrepreneur? So take us a bit on that journey.
You know, it's funny because I remember I was about 18, just before, probably 17, and I was in Belfast with my mother, and my sisters were living here at the time. And I remember saying someday, I was watching all these guys walking in suits and all this sort of stuff, and I remember saying to my mother, you know, someday I'm going to work for myself. I'm going to have my own business, Mom, someday. And I guess when I came back home from the States, you know, the one thing that America, I think, instills in you is a drive. And this is why, you know, when I said earlier on, sometimes the worst things can end up being the best things ever happen to you. Because when I came back, you know, I came back and I started working for a company. I wasn't making a lot of money with them. In fact, I'd taken a massive hike from what I was working for in the likes of NASA. But I knew it was a stepping stone. And then I always knew I wanted to start my own business. And I thought, because my background was all in tech. So when I met my business partner, I said, look, this is something, I really want to build something here. And Used Cars NI was born. That went on to, currently it's the number one platform in here, Northern Ireland, North of Ireland, whatever you want to call it. But it was something that the chips were always, there was a lot of big companies, big corporations that we were fighting against at the time. But I guess being under the radar, knowing tech from NASA days, knowing how to create good tech, I think that was a bonus. And then just this drive that we have got to do this. So that was, it was never in doubt the minute it was born in my mind that it was going to be the number one. Never was in doubt. And we are fortunate, the staff, people here, they're wonderful. They've got a great attitude, and we have great people. They say put better people around you that are much better than yourself. And in my case, that's easy every single time in whatever industry I go into. But we have been lucky that we have surrounded ourselves with really good people, and we continue to try and push the boundaries in terms of tech and customer service and just being the best at what we can do, whether it's in the tech businesses that I'm involved in or more recently in Regency House. It's for me, there's no need to think about, number two is good enough. You have to be number one. Otherwise, for me, it's not worth it.
Let's talk about Regency House. Beautiful facility. I guess that's kind of an antiseptic word. Beautiful place. And on a great section of Belfast with a nice park outside your window. Tell us about jumping into the tourism hospitality market, and what are you bringing to that market that haven't been there before?
Well, I bring an awful lot. I bring an awful lot to it, but I'm going to let Andrea answer this question because I think probably she's more qualified.
Yeah. So remember the donkey story? Yeah. Okay.
Does the donkey have a name?
I think it's a little bit like that as well with Regency House. It's something that has evolved. So this street years ago, back maybe 2015, 2014, most of these buildings were completely derelict and they had been abandoned for decades. And it was such an awful shame. It just so happened that the Used Cars NI office was only a street away. So there was a lot of parking around here. So we would park and then walk to the office. And so you could see these, what could be beautiful buildings, but had been neglected for a long, long time. And so one of the buildings came on the market and we joked around about maybe buying it and renovating it and then putting the Used Cars NI office in that building. So that's what we did. We bought one. And then the one beside that came on the market and we thought, well, that could be useful for something. So we bought that one. And we really started on the path of basically, redeveloping the building and making it an office. These buildings are listed and the amount of work, we had no idea what was
listed
ahead of
like
us.
A historical preservation kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. So there's very, very strict guidelines on what you can do with these buildings. And the objective really is to try to retain as much original character as you can, even if it seems impossible, even if most of the timber is rotten. You're really starting with the premise that you have to keep it, if at all possible. We had never redeveloped anything. So between a finance person and an IT person, we had no experience in this field. So we started down the path, and then we realized when we got into the building really how beautiful it could be, and it didn't feel like an office. So we then redesigned the scheme so that it would have more of a residential feel, more authentic to what the buildings would have been originally, which were grand private homes for the merchants of Belfast. So this would have been the suburbs of Belfast in the day. So the street would have been a dirt road, and they would have had the horse and cart and all the rest of it. So they're from the 1840s. So then we had more and more opportunities to purchase additional buildings. And as we started to renovate them, the question was, what do we do what do we do with them? How do we offer them to the public? And what we didn't want to just renovate them and sell them on. We wanted people to be able to come into these buildings and experience them and see the beautiful architecture. And so hospitality seemed to be the right way forward. And so we've been developing our offering really over the past couple of years. I think because we're not a large, big building that screams hotel, people don't feel like it's the same as a big hotel. It's definitely different. It's much more boutique in nature, but it is an evolving offering. And we have 2 more buildings that we're renovating down the street, which will really bring us
next year, you'll see.
Much further forward in terms of what we can offer to our guests. That we'll have an on-site restaurant, we'll have a bar, we'll have a wellness center, as well as additional accommodation. So the journey is continuing.
It seems like a great, we're not experts in any way, shape, or form of the kind of the hospitality market here in Belfast, but we know it's growing.
Yeah.
And we see some beautiful new modern hotels springing up, but you're quiet. And you're close. I mean, it's a 15-minute walk to City Hall. You really seem to be bringing another dimension to the hospitality offerings there.
Yeah, that's definitely how we see it as well. It is a different offering. A lot of times when our guests come, they want something a little quieter. Yeah. They like the idea of being on the square with the gardens out front. It's very reminiscent of London.
Yes.
So there's a lot of filming takes place out here when the film companies want this to look like London. This is where they come. So we have a lot of families. We have a lot of people who maybe just want to fly a bit under the radar. It's very easy to get in and out of here without being seen.
Yeah.
And we're able to give our guests a lot of personal attention. I think because we're small, we almost get to know our guests before they walk through the door. We know what kind of wine they like to drink, where they want to eat. You know, we organize their transportation. We try to be as involved as they would like us to be, so that when they're here, they really enjoy their time. And what we are hearing more and more from our guests is that they are surprised by Belfast. They are genuinely surprised. They didn't maybe know what to expect, but it's much better than anything they did expect. And they all want to come back. And that is, I think, a fantastic testament to not just what we're doing, but what everyone else is doing in Belfast with the restaurants and the different tourist attractions, the beautiful coastline up north, the golf. There's so much here, and we try to give people, you know, as much a taste of it as they can get in the time that they're with us. So.
Well, I can speak to that. Obviously, as a first-time visitor to Belfast, I've been very impressed by the experience so far. And sitting in the lovely presidential suite with the fall greenery turning from green to gold, it's an absolutely spectacular room. On behalf of myself and John, I'd like to thank Anthony and Andrea Kieran for taking time out of their busy day. As anybody that operates in the hospitality trade
who has a wedding they're planning for coming up.
There is no quiet day in this kind of business, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you both.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
After our conversation with Andrea and Anthony, we sat down for lunch, which featured a Belfast Bap. That led to a discussion about food and the restaurant experience on offer at Regency House. Fortunately, Chef Michael O'Connor could join us to tell us his backstory and a little of life as executive chef at a 5-star boutique hotel, along with his take on the Belfast food scene.
Well, I like a guest who wears a name tag. Sometimes I get into this little panic with a guest. What's the guy's name? So here we have Michael O'Connor, executive head chef, Regency House. I can wear that all on your official chefs. Does that be a tunic or a...
Yeah, we call it a tunic, or a chef's jacket.
Very good. Yeah. Well, Michael, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
We just have one of your lovely. This is a Belfast Bap.
Yes, a Belfast Bap. We grew up on it as kids. We would have got that for a breakfast with an egg baked up on a cup with a bit of salt and pepper, and then we would have got anything, ham into it, cheese into it. So we went into any grandmother's house in Belfast that have a Belfast Bap in the bread basket, like. So there was.
Well, as you're saying those words, it sounds like you're from here.
Yes, born and raised in West Belfast, yeah. So it was.
Tell us a little bit about growing up here, and then we'll get into your career.
Growing up was good fun. West Belfast back in the day, and the Troubles was good. Was madness. Good area, good family. Grandparents, really two sets of grandparents, both called Jimmy and James. Young boy, Belfast. Left school, wasn't very good at school. Didn't apply myself in school, and then decided to become a chef one day out of nowhere, out of left field. My father said to me when I left school, "You've got 2 weeks to get a job." So I went back to try and get some more education. I was too late for that. And somebody gave me a leaflet about cooking. And I liked cooking as a kid growing up. So I became a chef at 17. I worked in a place called the Balmoral Hotel, which is just off outside of West Belfast. And then did 3 years there, did a year in Lisbon Road. And then I got the great calling to go to London. And I decided to go to London to work for one of the best chefs about, a guy called Mark Pierre White, who trained Gordon Ramsay. I dare say a lot of your listeners will know who Gordon Ramsay is. Yeah. He's famous for making Gordon Ramsay cry and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the story. He worked for Gordon worked for Marco at Harvey's, which was Marco's 3-star restaurant in Wandsworth in London. Marco was the first youngest chef at that time to ever get 3 Michelin stars. So I went to work for him at 21-year-old, and it was the best experience of my life. It was 2 years of just 5 days a week, 14-hour days. Only time you got off is when you took holidays. Yeah. Your 2 days off, one was spent washing your whites, and the rest was sleeping. Yeah. So there wasn't really much to do in London. And then I decided to leave there, and I took over. I went and worked for one of the head chefs, Charlie Rushton, in a couple of pubs in Chelsea and Fulham. And I did that for probably about 9 years. Was I with them at a company? Maybe just a bit less. Went in as sous chef, then from sous chef to head chef to running all 3 pubs for them at one stage. And then I went and did a stint in Australia. I worked in a couple of nice restaurants in Australia, worked in a casino out there in Star City underneath a guy called Sean Connolly, who's from Leeds, Leeds, Yorkshire. And then I decided to come home then at 30, just after my 30th birthday, probably about just before my 31st birthday. And I come home and I opened up a restaurant called the Bark and Dog, which I just closed about 18 months ago. And it was open for 15 years. And it was probably one of the sort of, back then, 15 years ago, it was probably one of the first restaurants to sort of do stuff a little bit different than the sort of norm of what Irish cuisine was perceived to be. And that would have been big, heavy mash, gravy, 2 veg, meat. And come back, and when I left at 21, there was only 2 really good chefs that was really cooking here. One was Michael Dean, one was Paul Rankin. And then you had a gentleman called Danny Miller, grew up, and God rest his soul. And they were the only 3 big chefs. So I decided that when London came, that let's do London.
Room for one more big chef.
Well, when I came back, there was a lot more chefs. A friend of mine called Brian McCann, who I went to London with, and he was a head chef in a restaurant called Shoe on the Lisbon Road. And there's a few other chefs that went over to London and then came back and plied their trade back in Belfast in the north. There's Gareth from Mulder's Clubs, which is one of our Michelin star restaurant. There's Stephen Toneman and young Johnny at the Merchant Hotel and stuff like that, worked in London and come back. So we all come back with a knowledge of working in one of the busiest cities in probably the world, really, you know what I mean? London is. And the food was phenomenal. Like, as a 21-year-old, I thought I knew how to cook. Yeah. Oh, did I get my eyes up? Once it was scary. The first 2 months, I was on the phone to my mum crying, going, this is madness. They're screaming and shouting at me, and they're calling me this and they're calling me that. My mum was like, as long as they aren't beating you. And I went, I didn't tell the mum the full truth of some of the stories that happened. But it was an experience, and it was one thing I'd never, ever regret doing, is leaving here to go there and then come back and bring my knowledge back over here, which was good, you know what I mean? And there's a few chefs out there now that's run through my door at Bark and Dog that are now their own head chefs, their own restaurant owners, which is lovely to see. So it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm struck by, we had the pleasure of sitting down with Niall McKenna yesterday.
Niall's a great guy, so is.
And
another Westie as well. There's a lot of us Westies became chefs, and a lot of the big restaurants are West Belfast chefs. It's really crazy. There's loads and loads of good chefs out there, but it seems to be a good mainstream, and all came from the West for some mad reason.
Yeah, and it was interesting because your story kind of parallels his, in that he also did a fairly long stint in London.
Yeah.
To elevate the game and actually refer to a number of the chefs, Northern Ireland-based chefs.
Yep.
So are we getting into a point in the city now, because I'm struck by the quality of food being delivered here. It's not the boring, as you said, mash, one hunk of meat, and a couple of veg thrown on there with absolutely nothing. Niall talked about kind of making the dishes sing, keeping it simple, keeping it stripped down. So our chefs now, is it changing? Do you have to go to London now?
No, you could easily come to Belfast and have the sort of same experience as London. Fortunately, London's a bit more busier, so there's more opportunity to have smaller boutique sort of speciality restaurants, where one of my specialities was my burger, my beef shin burger. It takes 2.5 days to make, really famous for it.
2.5 days for a burger?
Yes, it's
What do you do to a burger to take 2.5 days?
So it's braised beef shin. It's in the centre of it. It takes 2.5 days to
braised
make. Beef shin. So the
beef
shin of the shin of the cow.
Mm-hmm.
You have to bring it in. You got to marinate it 24 hours. Then you got to cook it for 8 to 10 hours. Then you got to pick the meat, reduce the sauce.
I actually read some news clipping about this, that it's back on the menu for a brief time on Sundays.
It's back on the menu at a brief time. We did it last Sunday there, Sunday past us, but it will make an appearance in our next phase, phase 3. So it will.
So when we come back,
you will get one of the burgers.
Yes, okay, so that's marked down. The braised beef shin burger is a must.
It's not just one of your normal burgers. You just can't throw it on a barbecue, or you've got to seal it in a pan, bake it in the oven. So it's not your typical burger patty. It's unfortunately, we do have this culture at the moment where we're getting too many smash burgers, too many chicken wings, too many bad tacos, not good tacos.
Bar food.
And it's sort of taken over a wee bit, unfortunately. And the middle, what I call brasseries of what Bark and Dog was, what Niall has down in Waterman, all that we're sort of losing on, unfortunately, because a lot of these kids are coming in and they don't want that kind of food. It's that which, to me, it's a wee bit overkill at the moment. I think if we can get a few more decent brasseries back in and people cooking good food. I have a young gentleman, young Dean Ribete, coming to work for me, and he's a half Irish, half French gentleman, and his food's going to hopefully stick a mark again on Belfast cooking scene. We're conscious with phase 3 with the club not to go too crazy with the food and be it Michelin and really heavy and rich, where we're going to have a nice balance of what you would expect to have in a private club, you know what I mean, as in a nice restaurant where you have a burger, you have a steak, you have a pasta, but you also have the lovely lobsters and the duck dishes and the lovely roasted turbot and stuff like that. So finding that balance is a key to phase 3, really.
So talk to us about moving to Regency House. How did that come about? And tell us a little bit about how do you make a menu that fits the place? Because we're sitting in this beautiful room, just barely outside the city centre of Belfast. So you want to kind of have that flavour of the place. You don't want a one-size-fits-all.
It's probably been one of the hardest menus I did myself, because when I come back from London, I just replicated what I was doing in the pubs and stuff like that, and some of the finer name restaurants, and made a menu. We're making a menu for here, be it a 5-star establishment. It's hard to do, but also, as I said before, having that balance where, yes, 5-star, and we don't want to have the menu full of fogwas or lobsters and all that there, but we had to have a balance of it. So it took me a couple of months to get my head around a menu. We actually have a final meeting next week with Andrea and Katie, our business manager, to go through the final parts of the menu so we can start cooking dishes for them to taste and obviously pick properly. So when I closed Bark and Dog, I was sort of had, not fell in love with cooking, but sort of had enough a wee bit in the back teeth, and I sort of took myself back up to the West Belfast and helped the place open up a kitchen, and it didn't really work. And then a friend of mine is a 2-piece band called the String Ninjas, and he does gigs down in our function suite, and he says, I know a guy that'd be perfect for you guys, and introduced me to Katie, and we had a meeting, and a couple of days later I was in the kitchen and getting ready to rock and roll. So that was back in February, start of March. And we've just been sort of doing functions and then writing the menus for the next phase. So it's probably as I said, it's probably been the difficult menu of all the menus I've had to come up with, the concepts I've come up with. I've had concepts in my head which I've followed through before, restaurants that maybe haven't worked, but this has been a challenging one, but it's a good challenge, so it is.
Did you say pick the proper crockery back then?
Crockery.
Yeah, so I never would have thought of that, but obviously you have to decide what the dish
sort of every day.
and-
There's no, if you were putting like a lovely sort of lobster ravioli on a dish, maybe like this, it works, but or a plate that's normal. But you want something that maybe complements the dish, and also the color scheme. So there's stuff to think about like that as well. Where Andrea will have a big call on that there as well. Like, so whenever I get the dishes and start getting the crockery, then we can go, yeah, we like that color, but we don't like that color. Can we get that?
Never thought of that, but it's obviously now that you mentioned, obviously that's part of the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's the stuff that you don't really think about as a chef, as being a sous chef. No, you just started cooking that, but when you get to the head chef and sous chef, and especially being a restaurateur before, you've got to pick all that. You've got to pick what china you use and what crockery, what cutlery, and thank God I don't have to worry about any of the sort of the decor right now, because that's what Andrea is going to be doing.
Well, just give us, telegraph for us a dish that might be on the menu, or just a dish that you've served here. What's a favorite dish of yours?
Oh, favorite dish of mine? Oh, jeepers! Everybody, that's the most question I got asked all the time. What's your favorite dish to eat or cook? And I don't really have one.
What do you hear from patrons? Is there a dish or something that we respond to with surprise? Wow!
Well, our burger will have a burger does have a following. In the last 3 Sundays we've had very busy, and when you tell people the burger will be on the restaurant, they're like, "Oh my God, brilliant!" Yeah. That's.
I really was hoping we were going to be here, and then I saw it was.
Yeah, that's really good news. Yeah. We've got a couple of dishes on the menu at the moment. For the potential menu, we've got a beautiful lobster ravioli with tapioca pasta and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Dean's got this beautiful duck dish that he's going to do in cocoa powder, and this risotto, and it's I'm ready to eat it myself because I want to taste what he's doing. But every dish is you could put the best dish on and it could not sell on, you know what I mean? Because it depends what your clientele is. Our clientele will be a little bit, as at a private members club, it will be a little bit up market, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, people do want to have just good, honest food. At times they don't want to be coming in and there's one wee bit of meat and 4 different kinds of puree and one wee bit of asparagus. They sort of want to be a bit more substance to that, you know what I mean? And but yeah, dishes over the years. Beef Wellington's a classic, you know what I mean? I love a bit of beef Wellington. I do like a bit of sea bass. Dover sole. You can't go wrong with a bit of Dover sole on the bone. Simple. New potatoes, burnt butter. So yeah, pasta, any kind of pasta. Yeah. Everybody loves pasta. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So talk to us about maintaining sanity in the kitchen. So we watch, I don't know if it's crossed your path, but one of the most successful TV series lately is the fictionalized account of a restaurant in Chicago. Bear. It's called Bear.
But I haven't watched it yet.
Yes.
And we were having a conversation actually with Andrea and Anthony a couple weeks ago, and they asked me, "Is your kitchen like that?" And I went, "Not as crazy as that now, but back in the day it was when I first got back from London. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a reputation for being a hard ass. And at one stage, me and my head chef were in the restaurant one day, and that's all it was on the rota. And me and him had to sit down together and go, right, we need to stop. Hammering the kids, you know what I mean? We got to realize that we're not going to get us replicated throughout the building. We may come across a gem every so often, which we did. Yeah. Dean being one of them, the head chef of the restaurant, and a few others that come through my kitchen. There's Gavin Bradley and a few other people that have worked for me. And you just gotta maintain that there. That if you go crazy and you just have that constant berating of chefs, which I've had before. I've had people screaming in my face and calling me all sorts. You've got to take it back. And also as well, my health as well. At one stage I was going, I'm going to take a heart attack doing screaming, just getting annoyed over the smaller stuff. But you still got to set the precedent. You still got to set a point of that's where we can't let it slip. We can't let you slip. If you slip underneath that, and then quality goes down, people cut corners, the food isn't good enough, the flavour isn't there, the organisation isn't there. So to be a successful chef, you have to have them. You have to be really organised. You had to have a palate. You had to have a passion for what you do. And I have a passion for what I do. I don't think I could... At one stage, a couple of years ago, I thought, can I do something else in my life before it gets too old? And I went, I know nothing. I've been cooking since I was 17. So I've really just like, no.
I think obviously the reputation of the whole island of Ireland for food has changed dramatically. But is the food scene here in Belfast now a significant tourist draw?
Yes, it has. When we had, as I spoke with you before we come on air, we had Game of Thrones come over, and it was a big thing for the north of Ireland, a massive thing. They were in every restaurant. They had these celebrities coming over. We never had celebrities before because they never came over here because of the troubles. Yeah. But we had celebrities come over. We're getting gigs. We're getting people like John Bishop, the comedian. We're getting people coming over here to do stuff in the north of Ireland. Where unfortunately we don't have a super stadium like they do in Dublin. Yeah. Where if we had to have a super stadium in Dublin, we could host the big artists like Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whatever it might be up in the north. Unfortunately, when we want to see them, we got to go down to Dublin to see them. But the food scene in Ireland is fantastic. Galway, if you ever get a chance to go to Galway, Galway's food is out of this world. It's some of the best restaurants you probably want to eat in the island. Dublin's food scene is really good. There's a chef down there called Dylan McGrath. He's from West Belfast himself. He's down there. He's got a lovely feature, social and stuff like that, and he's cooking some serious food as well. So yeah, the food scene when I left at 21 was, as I said, it was bland. It wasn't great. It's a lot of the same. But now we've a lot of different people traveling different worlds, and people living in Spain and Thailand, and bringing that knowledge back and opening restaurants back here, and it's only good for the city and good for the island.
Well, let me just ask one more question: is it still Irish food?
Yes, because we're using the Irish product as much as possible. We really try and use as much. I'd say 90% of our fish and meat is from this island. The majority of the root sort of veg and the heavier veg is from this island because our climate doesn't let us grow the beautiful nice tomatoes, the beautiful Malfi Coast lemons. But we try and use as much as we can from this island because we've some fantastic fisheries. We have some fantastic farmers doing some beautiful meat. Peter Hannon up in Murrah doing lovely salt aged beef. And when you taste this beef, taste the ribeye that's cooked, char grilled meat in the rare, you can taste that Himalaya salt from the wall, know what I mean? The lovely fresh crab from Kilkeel. We got beautiful Portavogie prawns, which is also known as a Dublin blade prawn, coming from Portavogie. Absolutely sweet, succulent. When you put them into a pasta or through a fish pie, you can really taste that it is a nice prawn. So yeah, we have really good product in this island, and we're very privileged to have it as well. And Carlingford oysters, there's Michelin-star restaurants in the UK and Europe using Carlingford oysters, know what I mean? So some great products.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the fish pie.
Yeah, I do. So I do really good fish pie.
Well.
Yeah.
But we know you're a busy man,
yep.
So we don't want to use too much of your time. I will say yet again, I love this Belfast Bap. With a nod to my family that live down in Waterford, who have laid claim to the Bap apparently. But
well, they're very similar. They're very similar, so they are.
But the Belfast Bap has envisaged.
Yeah, loads of real butter.
is absolutely delicious, and it's been a total pleasure.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Lovely to meet the both of you.
To get that sense of Belfast and cooking and food, etc.
The passion.
Yeah. Well, sure, when you get back next time, we'll have a restaurant for you to eat in properly and you taste some good Irish food.
We're planning our next trip around the Shinburger.
Good, brilliant.
Yep. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, lads. Thank you.
Hey, John, great to get the backstory from both Anthony and Andrea on Regency House. But of course, it's not just a story about the hotel. It's also an extraordinary story that spans continents. And just to say, it was also a real delight to experience an alternative, if you will, in terms of the quality of places you can stay in Belfast. Obviously, we had the pleasure of staying in the wonderful Grand Central Hotel, which is right in the heart of Belfast. But if you want something that's really kind of quiet and exclusive, I can't imagine a better place. And certainly the lunch that Chef Michael served us up while we were talking with Anthony and Andrea was delightful. So a Belfast Bap made me really happy.
Indeed. And, besides the hospitality story, just amazing stories from Anthony, why he moved from South Armagh, why he beat a hasty retreat to the U.S., and where he finds himself working for NASA, of all things, meets Andrea and comes back, entrepreneurial career in several different areas, and really doing some great stuff at new hospitality option for Belfast. And I'd love to be a gatekeeper and keep this one to myself, ourselves, Martin, but people should really take a good look at the Regency House if they're looking for something special when they stay in Belfast. And we also want to thank Tourism Ireland, while we're at it, for their support of our Lost in Belfast series, working around the year, around the clock, promoting the island of Ireland as a compelling vacation and business events destination. And for more on travel to Northern Ireland in particular, go to discovernorthernireland.com and discover how you can embrace a giant spirit in Belfast and beyond.
Irish Stew is produced by John Lee, Martin Nutty, and Bill Schultz. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Bill Schultz. Music on Irish Stew was composed and performed by Rosa Nutty, with Donald Bowens on drums, Cathal O'Riordan on bass and synthesizer. For more on Rosa Nutty's music, please visit rosanutty.com.